Imagine you're walking through the scorching desert, lips cracked, water almost gone, all for a city where, as they said, gold lies almost underfoot. Timbuktu, a myth? Or was there really a place where salt was once exchanged for gold almost kilogram for kilogram? Why did European travelers risk death for this place? And why did camel caravans stretch for weeks through hellish heat? How much real wealth was hidden in its chests and libraries, and where did it go? Have beautiful legends deceived us? Or did we simply arrive too late? Now I'll show you what's usually hidden in footnotes, figures, chronicles, merchant greed, and one unexpected twist that keeps the myth of the City of Gold alive to this day. Don't change the channel. Next will be something that breaks the school picture of history. Want to know where the gold disappeared? Let's go. Timbuktu. The very name sounds like an incantation, like the whisper of wind over the Sahara dunes. For medieval Europeans, this wasn't just a city, it was a dream, a fairy tale, an almost unattainable mirage. But where did this legend come from? When exactly did Timbuktu emerge? Historians say the city was founded by Tuaregs around the year 1130 of our era as a seasonal camp. Can you imagine? What later became a symbol of immeasurable wealth began as a simple nomadic stop by a well. The well, by the way, was guarded by a woman named Buktu, hence the name Timbuktu, which in the Tuareg language means Buktu's well. From a modest well to a legendary city of gold, now that's what I call career growth. But what transformed an ordinary oasis into a center of attraction for all of West Africa? The answer is both simple and complex. Geography. Timbuktu was located in a unique place, just 12 kilometers from the Niger River, at the very edge of the Sahara. Imagine a crossroads where two worlds meet. From the north, the endless sands of the desert. From the south, fertile lands and waterways. It's like building a shopping mall on the only road between two huge cities. Success was practically guaranteed. By the 13th century, Timbuktu had already become a key point in trans-Saharan trade. Here, caravans from the north, loaded with salt, copper, and fabrics, met traders from the south, bringing gold, ivory, and slaves. But the main commodity that made Timbuktu legendary was, of course, gold. It came from the rich deposits of Bambouk and Bouré, located further south in the upper Niger. And here's where it gets interesting: the price relationship between salt and gold. Have you ever wondered why we say worth its weight in gold? In Timbuktu, this phrase took on a literal meaning. Salt, which we can now buy for pennies, was incredibly valuable in medieval West Africa. So much so that at certain periods, a bar of salt was actually exchanged for an equal weight of gold. Sounds fantastic? But remember, without refrigerators, without preservatives, in a hot climate, salt was the only way to preserve food. It was a matter of survival, not luxury. The Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited Timbuktu in 1353, wrote, "Gold comes from the south, salt from the north, and God's money from everywhere." Beautifully said, isn't it? But what lies behind this poetic phrase? Real numbers. At its peak, up to 12 tons of gold passed through Timbuktu annually. Try to imagine this mountain of yellow metal, and a significant portion of this wealth remained in the city in the hands of merchants, scholars, and rulers. But Timbuktu is not just about gold. Paradoxically, the city's real treasure was books. Yes, you heard right. By the 16th century, Timbuktu had become the largest intellectual center of the Islamic world. Here was the famous Sankore University, where up to 25,000 students studied. For comparison, Oxford at that time had only a few hundred students. Impressive, isn't it? Hundreds of scribes worked in the city, creating copies of ancient manuscripts. Books were literally valued at their weight in gold. One good manuscript could cost as much as several camels. Can you imagine the demand for knowledge? Huge libraries were kept in the homes of scholars and merchants. By some estimates, at its peak, Timbuktu contained up to 700,000 manuscripts. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, poetry, philosophy, religion. An entire universe of knowledge in the middle of the desert. Now let's talk about how Timbuktu became a myth for Europeans. The first vague rumors about the City of Gold reached Europe in the 14th century. On the Catalan Atlas of 1375, Timbuktu was already marked as an important point. But what's interesting, no European had seen this city with their own eyes until the early 19th century. Why? Because the local rulers perfectly understood if Europeans were let in, armies would follow. And they were absolutely right. This created perfect conditions for the birth of a myth. When a place is known only by hearsay, imagination fills in the details. And soon in European salons, they were telling stories about palaces of pure gold, about roofs lined with gold plates, about kings so rich that even their elephants and camels wore gold ornaments. Have you noticed how human fantasy works? It always exaggerates what is inaccessible. The first European to reach Timbuktu and return alive was the French explorer René Caillié. This happened only in 1828. Can you imagine how many centuries the city remained a mystery? Caillié traveled disguised as an Arab, learned local languages and customs. And what did he see? A city of clay. No golden palaces, no pavements studded with precious stones. Here's how Caillié described his impressions. I looked at this city, which had become the goal of my journey, a city that had occupied my thoughts for so long. And instead of a rich, majestic, and civilized city, I found only a collection of poorly built clay houses. Can you imagine his disappointment? The man risked his life, traveled thousands of kilometers, and instead of a fabulous El Dorado, he saw an ordinary African city. But you know what's ironic? Caillié arrived in Timbuktu too late. By the 19th century, the great city had already lived through its heyday and was in decline. It's like arriving in Venice 100 years after its golden age and wondering why it's not as magnificent as in legends. Timbuktu was indeed wealthy, but in a different era. Timbuktu's peak of power came in the 15th–16th centuries, when the city was part of the Songhai Empire. During this time, the population reached 100,000 people, a huge number for a medieval city. For comparison, London in the same period had about 50,000 inhabitants. The streets of Timbuktu were full of merchants from North Africa, Egypt, and Arabia. Dozens of markets operated in the city, mosques gathered thousands of believers, and scientific discussions boiled in universities. So what happened? Why did Timbuktu decline? Here we come to a turning point in history, an event that changed the fate of not only the city, but all of West Africa. In 1591, the Moroccan army under the command of Pasha Judar crossed the Sahara and defeated the forces of the Songhai Empire. Timbuktu was captured, plundered, and subjugated by the Moroccans. Imagine 4,000 soldiers with muskets against a traditional African army with spears and bows. This was one of the first demonstrations of how firearms changed the balance of power in the world. Technological superiority decided the outcome of the battle in a matter of hours. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? History often repeats itself. But the most devastating blow to Timbuktu's prosperity was not delivered by war, but by geography, or rather, the change in trade routes. With the development of navigation in the 16th, 17th centuries, trans-Saharan trade began to lose its importance. Why risk your life in the desert when you can deliver goods by sea? Gold, ivory, slaves, all this was now exported through ports on Africa's Atlantic coast. Timbuktu, once a key trade hub, found itself away from the new routes. It's as if in our time, a major city suddenly found itself without access to the internet and mobile communications. Decline is inevitable. By the time Europeans finally reached Timbuktu, only memories and half-ruined buildings remained of its former glory. The city that once controlled gold flows had turned into a provincial settlement on the edge of the desert. But what happened to the legendary treasures of Timbuktu? Where did all the gold from the legends go? Part was taken by Moroccan conquerors, another part gradually dispersed throughout the world through trade. But Timbuktu's most valuable treasure, its libraries, met a special fate. When Islamist militants captured the city in 2012, they intended to destroy the ancient manuscripts as heretical. And then something amazing happened. Local residents organized a secret operation to save the manuscripts. Hundreds of thousands of priceless books were secretly transported by boats on the Niger River, hidden in homes, buried in sand. It was a real operation of cultural resistance. Isn't that surprising? Centuries after Timbuktu's glory faded, its inhabitants were still willing to risk their lives for books. Today, Timbuktu is a small city in Mali with a population of about 54,000 people, clay houses, narrow streets, ancient mosques, and tourists coming to see the place once considered the richest city in the world. UNESCO has included Timbuktu in the World Heritage List, recognizing its enormous historical and cultural value. But political instability in the region makes the city difficult to access for travelers. So was Timbuktu a city of gold, or is it just a myth? The truth, as usual, is somewhere in the middle. Timbuktu was indeed an incredibly wealthy city, but not in the fairy tale sense that European imagination portrayed. Its wealth lay not so much in golden palaces as in control over trade routes, in intellectual influence, in cultural significance. It was, if you will, the medieval equivalent of a modern financial and educational center. And you know what's most surprising? The legend of Timbuktu lives on. Even now, when we can virtually walk through its streets via Google Maps, the city continues to be shrouded in an aura of mystery. The expression "as far away as Timbuktu" is used in many languages to denote something incredibly remote, almost unattainable. The city has become a metaphor, a symbol, and that is perhaps the most enduring wealth that can ever be. What can we take from the history of Timbuktu today? Perhaps the main lesson is that even the greatest centers of civilization can decline if external conditions change. Technologies, trade routes, political situations, all of these can instantly devalue advantages that seemed unshakable. Timbuktu was the center of the world until the world changed around it. Makes you think about modern megacities, doesn't it? In conclusion, Timbuktu is a story about how reality turns into myth, and myth influences reality. The city was indeed rich in gold, but not as much as legends claimed. It was indeed a center of learning, but its intellectual heritage was endangered. It did indeed control trans-Saharan trade, but lost this advantage with changing global trade routes. Now I want to ask you, which modern cities, in your opinion, might repeat the fate of Timbuktu? What technological or economic changes could transform today's centers of civilization into tomorrow's open-air museums? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really interested in hearing your perspective. If you enjoyed this journey through the sands of time to the legendary City of Gold, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Ahead of us are equally fascinating stories about forgotten civilizations and their treasures. By the way, next time we'll travel to a place where legends of wealth turned out to be true, but this wealth brought not prosperity, but the downfall of an entire empire. Intrigued? Then stay with us. And finally, perhaps the real gold of Timbuktu is not metal, but the knowledge that was stored in its libraries. After all, ultimately, the only thing that has survived the centuries is not palaces and treasuries, but ideas and stories, like the story of Timbuktu itself, which I just told you.